Well, hey, if you don't know me, I'm Cade, creator of Collaborate Worship, and today I'm joined by James Wasem with Great Church Sound. It's always an honor to collaborate with James, so let's jump right in. In this video, we're going to share some practical ways to grow your mixing skills. You know, something I'm always telling people is to take things one step at a time. If you try to tackle the whole mixer at once, you're sure to get paralyzed. But if you focus and take it one step at a time, it all becomes very manageable. And before you know it, you can't believe the mix you're creating. James, what are your thoughts on this one step at a time method?
I think it's brilliant in a lot of ways. I mean, the way I learned the mixer is basically just being handed the mixer and saying, well, figure it out. There's inputs and an output, and just figure out how to make sound go from one side to the other and sound good. Oh yeah, make it sound good. And that was a very hard way to learn, especially in a live sound environment. So I think breaking things down into manageable steps is a huge game changer for learning something and doing it in a way that you're not like completely paralyzed, like you said, by looking at this thing and being like, okay, I don't even know where to start. So approaching things from step by step, 1, 2, 3, and so on, helps immensely.
You know, I would even go so far as to say, if you don't understand something just yet, you should turn it off. Like if you don't understand compression, don't like use whatever settings somebody else put on there and like just let it keep going. Just turn it off until you're ready to understand compression. What do you think about that?
Yeah, when I do some of my in-person training, that's one of the biggest things I push for. I'll go into a church and people be using compression and reverb and 10 bands of EQ and all this stuff. First thing I do, and they're horrified when I do it, I go wipe out all those settings. I bypass them, or even better, I zero them out because most of the time, they don't even know why the settings are the way they are. And it's better to start from zero and build back in gradually. And honestly, the more you add to that, especially if you're not sure why you're doing it, the more mud and bad stuff you're adding to the mix, the more you're distracting from the pure element of what you're trying to make happen and reinforce. So, I always say if you don't know why you're using it, turn it off and take it out.
So after you clear out those settings, do you have to have a meditation moment for everybody just to calm down before you go on with the training?
I've seen people get very anxious when I do that, especially if they've got like little dots or Post-it notes and all this stuff. I remember the old analog mixers. People would have notes and arrows and little those sticky dots all over the place. They'd just be horrified when I took them all off. How are we going to know how it goes back? Fortunately, with digital consoles, you can often save presets, and everybody's a little less anxious because they could not listen to a word you say, and after you're done, just go back and recall their old crappy preset and go back to the way things were. That's fine. Everybody has their own way of navigating new material. But I think I do get a lot of anxious looks when I first do that sometimes.
Well, hey, if you're enjoying this conversation so far, will you let us know with a like, because that helps this video get out to all of your fellow sound techs so they can see this video as well. All right, continuing the conversation, what would you say are the top 3 things to learn when it comes to mixing? If we're taking that step-by-step method, where do we start first? What's step 1, 2, and 3? It's
all about, really starting where the signal comes into your board, or even before that, where it comes into the cord. You've got audio inputs out there, and they might be microphones, they might be guitars, they might be something that just plugs in, even an MP3 player, an iPhone or Bluetooth device. Take note of what that source is. And if you're maxed out on the volume control for, say, an iPhone or a Bluetooth device, you might want to back that down a little bit so you're not overloading the input stage of whatever that input needs to be on the mixing console. If you've got an electric acoustic guitar, a lot of those are battery-powered active pickups, so make sure you have good quality batteries in there. You'll get scratchy tones, poor tone quality, signal cutting in and out, all kinds of stuff with bad batteries. Same goes for wireless mics. And then, of course, with mic placement, it's all about getting it at the right location so you're capturing the sound you actually want to capture. If it's too far away, it'll be thin or tinny or just too much air in the mix. If it's too close, it'll clip, or you'll get too much string noise or too much percussive elements. So it's taking the time to get things right at the source. And then it's coming into the console and adjusting that first level control, the gain or the trim knob. That's one of the biggest things that people mess up on when they're first learning sound, is they get distracted by the faders and the EQ knobs and all these other settings, and they forget about the most important knob on the mixer, which is the gain. And so that's something I like to remind people about, because it is the first place and the only place you can control that input signal properly in the mixer. If you mess that up, everything downstream from there is also messed up. And then it's just going, there's a reason why the channel strip or the orientation on the console is laid out the way it is, because it comes into the back of the console with your inputs. It starts at the top with that trim knob, and then there's the low cut filter or high pass filter where you tell it immediately after the gain where to cut that signal off, because a lot of times we don't need a lot of the low frequencies. So it's best to remove them at the beginning, not later. Do it first. And so pay attention to how that channel strip is oriented. And sometimes you can get into even fancier things like gates and other processing utilities. And those are often in that section because you're doing it in a step-by-step way so that you're taking care of that input signal the correct way before it goes on to any other processing utilities. So I think that's a really good tip that I started to pay attention to, is like, wait a minute, all these knobs are laid out a certain way. Maybe I need to use them in that order. Maybe that's what the engineers were thinking when they built this device. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. But I think ordering things step by step, super crucial, and go through it in a very ordered way and know why you're adjusting something, like we talked about earlier.
You know, I think one of the most shocking things you said was that when going step by step on creating a great mix, you don't even touch the mixer. Like, you go up to the stage and you make sure that your microphone is right, that your singers are holding their microphones correctly, and all of that kind of stuff. How often do you find that people who are mixing at churches just forget that whole aspect of it? They just go sit down at the mixer and just stay there.
Yeah, actually more often than you might expect, more often than they expect, for sure. And I constantly have to remind myself of that, if I hear something that's off, a lot of times I'll look at the EQ, I'll look at the compression, I'll look at reverb, I'll look at all these settings. And then I have to remind myself, wait a minute, where is that microphone placed? What type of guitar are we using here? What type of microphone are we using? What is the pickup pattern? There's all these things that actually impact the sound quality much more than just the EQ settings or what special compressor I've got on it. In fact, one church I was at recently doing some training, we had a really tough time getting great sound quality from one of the vocals. And at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I think we need to change the microphone for this singer, because it sounds good on this other singer, but that doesn't mean it sounds good on this other one. This was a female vocal, and it sounded great on the male worship pastor, but not very well on the female soloist. And so we actually experimented with changing the microphone, and we actually used a much cheaper microphone for that singer because it sounded better. I don't care what the brand is, what the model number is, how fancy the color is, whatever. If it sounds good, it is good. That if it's working for you, use it and pay attention to those things. It's often a simple fix that will make the most profound difference.
Yeah, man, that's so good. We've experienced the same thing with vocal microphones. And something that you said earlier that I also connect with is just following how things are laid out in the mixer, as if those engineers, thought through that for us, which they did, of course, and just going step by step through those. You start at gain, get that set for every channel. You go to the low cut filters next. Do I need a low cut filter? More than likely, yes, you need a low cut filter. And just figuring out where the placement is for that. And then what's next? The gate. Does this channel need a gate? In most cases, no, but some things are going to need a gate. So you decide at that point. And then the compressor, right? And then EQ, and then your bus mixes or your effects. So you just kind of go down the line, figure out what you need, what you don't need, and you're golden. It's good stuff. I want to jump in here for just a few seconds to tell you about Church Sound Made Simple. In this stress-free training, I walk you through a step-by-step learning process where you can go from complete newbie to confident behind the mixer in just 8 weeks. You can get access today by using the link in the description. And James, you've watched every video in Church Sound Made Simple. What are your thoughts on the step-by-step onboarding process for new sound techs?
Honestly, Kate, I thought you made a mistake when you told everybody to take 8 weeks to go through this course. I was just like, really? That's a long time. But then I realized going through the course, I'm like, oh, I know what's happening here. And it's brilliant. I was taken aback at first and then fully converted. I think it's a paradigm shift for a lot of team leaders and pastors needing to train their church volunteers how to get a great mix and how to be getting consistent mixes for worship. And it's not the shotgun approach. It's not, oh, you got to learn all this stuff all at once. Like, no, you learn this and do your best to master that. You'll never be perfect at it, maybe, but you can really, really get it dialed in. What is gain? How does it work? And how does it affect my sound quality? I mean, you could spend a month just on that one topic and still not have it down to perfection, but a week or two is pretty good. So you figure that out, you start going through the experimenting with the filters and the faders, where you should be mixing. What is a fader? How does it work? Where should it be located when you're mixing on the console? How does it relate to the other faders on your channels? And then going through the EQ and getting those basics down. Honestly, the step-by-step layout that you have in Church Sound Made Simple is a game changer for team training. And I think it's incredibly profound.
Well, thanks, man. And what's cool is I know that it works because we use it at our church. And we just recently, there was a 16-year-old, he's interested in the sound and he wants to help out, but he doesn't have any experience. I'm like, no problem. I'm going to send you through the onboarding course in Church Sound Made Simple. And he went through that 8 weeks. And on the 9th week, we let him mix by himself. So those 8 weeks are designed to have the newbie mix with somebody who's confident. And they do it side by side for 8 weeks. They're just learning one thing each week. And then on week 9, it's like, go for it. Let's see what you got. And he created one of the best mixes that I've ever heard. And it really blew me away. I was like, wow. So I'm thankful, just to have the training for my team. And that's kind of one of the reasons I created it, because we wanted to be able to bring new people onto the team too, and really didn't have a process for them other than go watch all these videos and let's sit down for a 4-hour training. And nobody really likes that. So I was like, I've got to come up with something else. And it's working really well. I love it.
Do you know what other positive side effect that probably has, the way you do that training process and the way it's structured? It's that I bet you that you get more volunteer retention. They will stay engaged, they'll be better engaged, and they'll stay engaged longer. They'll stay part of that team longer. And they'll invite others to the team, because when they do, they know there's a training process that they go through. It's not chaotic, it's not frenetic, and it's not super stressful. And then they grow in confidence and capacity and skill, and they can be part of the team without stressing out every Sunday, waking up with ulcers on Sunday morning, wondering, oh no, am I going to even know how to turn this thing on? I think that breaking things down in the proper way with step-by-step process, and then creating that type of environment that's bite-sized, it changes everything when you adopt that as a church sound leader or pastor, getting your team on board. And you'll be blessed with people wanting to stay around longer and wanting to invite more people to the team. So hopefully you're seeing the benefits of that in your own church. I know other people certainly have.
Yeah, we are. And so for anybody who wants to get access to that training, you just visit churchsoundmadesimple.com. You can see all the details there and sign up today. All right, one last question before we go. If you were to give somebody a power tip when it comes to growing your mixing skills, what would it be?
Oh, man. I always love this question because it's a simple tip, but it's the one thing that took I wouldn't say zero to hero, but it feels like that when you've mastered this tip. And that's using a parametric EQ or a sweepable EQ, even on an old analog console. No problem with that whatsoever. You can learn how to tune your ears and listen for frequencies by just using one EQ band and boosting it or cutting it a little bit and sweeping it across the frequency spectrum as someone's playing a guitar, piano, singing, whatever the source is. And you can use that to train your ears to pick out what sounds good, what doesn't sound good. Try boosting and cutting different ranges. And you want to do this during sound check. Don't do this live because you can really hear it live if you do it correctly. But that's the most profound thing I've ever learned in live sound. And I use it to this day. I've been doing live sound for over 20 years, and I still use that to train my ears to get familiar with a mix, to get familiar with a room, a piece of equipment, an input source, whatever it is. That one tip will take you places in sound.
Good stuff, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom today on this topic. If you want to hear James and I talk about some other topics regarding church sound, just click the video on your screen or use the link in the description. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to see future videos like this, and we'll see you next time.